Welcome, HCI members. Thank you very much for joining us for this live webcast, Engaging Independent Contractors. Whose role is it, procurement or HR or both? Here's a quick snapshot of how we'll spend our time together today. In just a moment, we'll get started with our feature presentation. Of course, we'll be sure to save time for your questions, although we'll talk about that in just a moment. And finally, I encourage you, if you notice there's a funky little hashtag in front of this HCI webcast agenda, I'll encourage you to take the conversation online to Twitter. Make sure to use the hashtag HCI webcast. To ask a question, which I encourage you to do at any point throughout the webcast, I'll encourage you now to open the question and answer interface. Click on the Q&A button at the top of your screen. It will open a question and answer interface, which you can undock and then move anywhere on your screen to keep open throughout the webcast. You can use this to share a comment, ask a question, or share your own creative best practices as it relates to the management of independent contractors or the larger field of talent management. You can also use this question and answer interface to interact with a tech specialist should you have any technical support needs. So open it now, keep it open throughout the webcast, and ask those questions or share those comments as they occur to you, and I'll be happy to share them on your behalf. As a reminder, the best way to listen to today's webcast is through the internet audio broadcast. To do that, you, of course, want to unmute your computer speakers, or maybe you listen over headphones. And you can click on a voice and video button at the top of your screen and then click on Join Audio. If you don't have that option, you're listening to the webcast in a little bit of a different way, use that Q&A interface, and our friendly HCA tech support will be happy to assist you. I'll also share that you can find the slides that accompany today's webcast on the Managing Independent Contractors community page under the webcast on demand section. So I'm guessing that you probably will want those. I think that you'll find some interesting. Feel free to go and download those now or post-webcast. Hi, my name is Amy Lewis. I'm the practice leader for talent strategy and acquisition practices here at the Human Capital Institute. I'm very pleased to be with you today for this webcast. I've shared a couple of different ways that you can connect with me if you'd like to. You can follow me on Twitter, or you can invite me to be part of their network on LinkedIn. I'm more pleased, however, to welcome to the conversation today's featured guests. And we have assembled for you today, I think, a really great and diverse group of experts that touch into the field in talent management. So I want to just briefly go around the room and welcome them and say hi. So first, I'm actually going to work right to left and say hi and welcome to Jay Lash, who is the Vice President of Market Strategies at MBO Enterprise Solutions, where he is responsible for exploring new markets for the MBO business model and creating new business opportunities. Recently, he developed strategic alliances with human capital industry partners in the VMS, the vendor management system, MSP, managed service provider, and staffing industry space. And before joining MBO, Jay was at Allegiance Group Services as a leader on their human capital solutions team. Jay, welcome to you.
Well, thank you. Pleasure being here.
Well, we're glad to have you. We'll also extend a warm welcome to Chris Dwyer, who is a senior analyst with Aberdeen Group in the global supply management practice. He has extensive writing, editing, and research experience and has authored over 120 research studies and documents in his 6-year tenure with Aberdeen. Chris, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Very glad to be here.
Welcome to Ann Odenall. Ann is the Director of Talent Acquisition at WellPoint and has over 20 years of experience and a demonstrated ability to influence corporate decision makers. Her responsibilities at WellPoint include managing the recruitment function for all of the WellPoint locations for operations and medical specialties, including the component which is outsourced, which gives you, I'm sure, an interesting perspective. Hi, Ann. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you.
Finally, I'd like to say hello to Deborah Burns, who is Senior Deputy General Counsel, Employment and Benefits at United Health Group, where she leads the employment and benefit legal team in providing employment, labor, employee benefit, and executive compensation counseling to the human capital organization and United Health Group's operating companies, United Healthcare and Optum. Hi, Deborah. How are you?
I'm well. Thanks so much, Amy.
I'm so jazzed about this webcast today, folks. I feel like we have like a brain trust non-paral, if you will, today with us. So with that, Jay, I'm going to turn things over to you.
Well, very good. Let's start with a brief welcome to everybody on the call. I'm glad to be hosting this webinar, and I'm really thankful to have this eminent cast with me of both clients, advisors, and friends in the industry. I'm broadcasting here from the foggy coast of central Maine. I'm sure you from your ideal locations, comfortable in your own offices and rooms. Hopefully you can sit back and enjoy the conversation over the next hour. I'm from MBO Partners, as I mentioned. MBO Enterprise Solutions is the enterprise side or B2B side of our company. MBO makes it safe and easy for independent consultants to work together. So just in case some of you don't know what MBO Enterprise Solutions, or for that matter what our core offering is, which is the Independent Contractor Engagement Specialist, we are a category, if you would, of a service provider that manages the company's aggregate use of all independent consultants or contractors. We've been in business for 25 years. We also have a platform in which our consultants operate their business under. So we provide sort of a consumer service to independent consultants. And we also embrace the high-end consultants. We consider that consultants like to work with MBO, thus making it easier for companies who use consultants to engage them through MBO. So I think it might be helpful for us to move the conversation today. Let's talk a little bit about what's brought this topic to the forefront. Why engaging independent contractors is a questionable rule for, is this somebody HR should be engaging? Is this something that procurement needs to take the lead on? Or is it both? Or perhaps a legal or the business should get involved? So let me kind of start with a topic statement. And that is, companies are using independent contractors more now as the alternative to hiring full-time employees to do all of their work. So after the recession, you're seeing more and more companies are saying, rather than hiring back a number of full-time, very high-level experts, business is moving pretty quickly and rapidly changing, so maybe we need to bring in our special consultants and advisors and strategic freelance consultants on an as-needed basis, just as they moved in their contingent workforce for temporary help to serve just a just-in-time sort of requirement. We've done some research on this particular group, and we see that there are 16 million people in that workforce that consider themselves independent consultants, temps, freelancers. And typically, at an enterprise organization, it's procurement that sources or at least vets these small service providers. It's also placed under the contingent workforce umbrella commonly, so managed by an MSP or a VMS system, and ultimately regulated and the governance being applied through some sort of a contingent workforce management program. But more and more, we're now seeing that HR is getting involved as the workforce is becoming a more strategic component of the overall workforce plan. With the help of these experts that we have on the panel, we're going to explore why this is happening, how we embrace these independents so they have access to this talent and get the most out of them, and as well, what is the role that HR needs to play with this segment. Employee engagement is a critical concern of HR, so should IC engagement also be a considerable concern. So as you know, these are our panelists, and I assembled a group from legal, from talent acquisition, and Chris Dwyer being an analyst with the Aberdeen group, representing procurement in general, because it is a broad part of the overall solution. I think, as we mentioned, this is sort of a perfect storm that's occurring now. Many of you probably know independent contractors are a growth in the demographics because of the projectization of work. There's both loyalty and lack of loyalty in this population. They're loyal to themselves and their brand and maybe not as loyal to their client and thus not looking for full-time employment as much as they are looking to literally create their own business opportunity. I've actually heard people tell me that the new American dream is not to own a home, 2 kids and a dog, but to own a business. And that's commonly what we're seeing in our population. We also see that there is a tremendous amount of new regulation, new legislation, and probably backed by the idea that there is a tax gap in all of our federal and state governments. We want to see that literally this group might be part of that tax gap, that if they're not being taxed and properly withheld through employee withholdings, then maybe the government needs to step in and make sure that these individuals are in fact classified properly. If they're employees, they should be employees. If they're businesses, they should be 1099 and operated as a business. So I won't get into the details on the actual selection of regulatory and legislative changes, but this is a good little representation of where it's coming from, and obviously I could answer questions on this later as well. I think it's pretty clear that the challenges are obvious. The IRS can levy misclassification penalties that are pretty high, but after you get through the actual misclassification, what you're finding is there's opportunity for class action lawsuits, there's opportunity for other serious ramifications, brand damage, SOX miscompliance, wage and hour problems. Once those individuals are deemed employees, then retroactively the government is likely to start looking for the proper regulations to apply as employees, not as businesses. So let's start our conversation by maybe moving this discussion into our representative from the Human Resources or Talent Acquisition. So Ann, let me ask you a general question. Human Resources, are independent contractors part of a robust workforce management strategy?
Yes, Jay, for us they are. I'm an absolute believer in making sure that individuals who run our businesses are provided with a spectrum of resources. And, that might include regular hiring, full or part-time, temporary hiring, and we're a big user of contingent workforce, and independence. It's really important that the business has the flexibility to find the resources they need to resolve the issues that they have at that time. I think what we've been seeing in our organization is that, we're seeing things are moving a lot faster. For those of you who are familiar with the insurance industry, there's a lot of change going on right now, and we need to be able to call on resources who we might not have in-house or have developed. Different skill sets are required. Things are happening more quickly, and workforce needs have changed. So in order to address that, we wanted to make sure that there were avenues by which people can reach out and find the right resources. And if it's an independent, that's the right avenue for that business. Part of what we find is that the dynamic of an independent contractor relationship is different. We do know that there's a large population who've moved to independent contractor status, and they're experts, and we want to be able to tap those experts. Those are people with specific knowledge that we may not have in-house. We find that it adds yet another aspect of flexibility to our workforce that that we haven't yet provided in-house. I mean, as the workforce changes, we want to make sure that we have a happy workforce, people who can apply their expertise in different kinds of ways. So, like we flex hours, and we have work at home, and we have a lot of options for our regular staff. But bringing in an independent allows another kind of facet to a flexible workforce. Bringing in outside competencies that are different from our core competencies are important as well. One of the examples that I like to share with you is that we use doctors a lot as independents. Physicians, don't want to leave their practice. That's what they train for so long. But we sometimes need specific skill sets like that. So that's why I think independents are really important in our workforce management strategy.
Ann, let me ask a side question, but maybe a comment, just a disclaimer. I've asked these panelists to join me and ask them to speak about their individual experience, not necessarily expressing the views of their current employers. But, relative to WellPoint, and you mentioned the doctors, why is it that a doctor would see independent work as, separate from their practice area? What's the rationale behind that?
Well, what that allows them to do is continue to practice. I mean, we don't want to create conflict of interest for doctors, and we're very cautious about that. And, sometimes we need somebody with a very specific expertise. Pediatric brain disorders, for instance, and I'm totally making this up. And we would not have that expertise in-house.
Yeah.
But we absolutely need someone with cutting-edge expertise on those kinds of questions. And so that sort of dynamic allows us to engage doctors in a way that's different than a traditional relationship that would be a regular employee.
Great. All right, good points.
Hey, Ann, this is Amy, and I have a question from Beth in the audience. So thanks so much, Beth, for the question. Beth mentions that she reads a lot about the importance of including contract talent, including independent contractors, in the workforce plan itself. And we read a lot about, including HCI and MBO partners have done research on the benefits of including independent contractors in workforce planning efforts. And part of hearing about the benefits means that we always hear about the risks, too. How does your organization include ICs in your workforce plan, and how do you strike that balance between benefits and risk?
I would probably leave the in-depth risk questions to Deborah, but we do have some businesses that include independent contractors in their workforce planning. I think we have some ways to go in terms of workforce planning in general, but I think that trying to figure out how to balance the annual budget with, the needs that we have for the business allows managers to pay attention to the whole spectrum of employment. And I'm happy to say that my experience has been evolving with this, and that, I'm seeing more and more individuals who are really thinking out the workforce plan about, knowing that we have to get to an end goal, and is it better to outsource or to engage a full-time employee or engage an independent contractor. We work hard on the risk. I mean, we really want to follow the compliance needs that we have. I mean, we pay very close attention to that. And part of what we do, and I think Jay will probably speak to this later, is we try to create a process by which those risks can be managed and watched.
Yeah, one point to add to that, and just from my experience with other human resources professionals that are involved with workforce planning, what they've recommended is that there are three distinct buckets in which your talent might need to be segregated and then planned accordingly, and that's your obviously full-time staff that are obviously responsible for certain core competencies of the business. Then there are going to be temporary staff to augment those same roles. And then this is a unique group. This is the staff that comes in not only to provide advice, counsel, but also serve in some cases in outsourced capacity. So there might be something that's outside of the core business but critical to the business, and you need to outsource, just like you might do the mailroom or you might outsource travel services. There might be other businesses and some that are very close and very dear to the strategic intent of the business that also fall into that category. So when the planning is done, there needs to be an accounting for work that is going to be dealt to this particular third category. So let's get procurement side of this. So we understand HR, doesn't want to miss this talent, but procurement typically has been responsible for the sourcing of outside vendors, especially these small service providers, sometimes considered indirect spend, sometimes considered complex spend categories where there isn't a lot of bidding going on. Just finding that expert is hard enough. So, Chris, tell us a little bit more. Is independent consultant a part of the service of a contingent workforce umbrella?
Thanks, Jay. Again, very, very glad to be here and represent the procurement community. As Jay had said earlier, a big part of my research focuses on on the procurement and sourcing community and how companies are managing their spend. So it's really interesting to take a look at this, really the slice of contingent labor from the procurement point of view. And to answer your question, Jay, the representatives of my research are really struggling nowadays with IC engagement and management because they're not sure whether that's part of the contingent labor umbrella, part of their contingent labor umbrella management program, or whether it's just something outside of what they have going on, in terms of efficiency and things like that. Last week I was interviewed by a reporter from the Los Angeles Times who was writing an article about the rise of contingent labor and temporary labor, and she basically, the first question she asked was why? Why are companies moving towards this project-based work instead of hiring more full-time equivalents? And even though I'm more of a procurement representative than anything else, I spoke on behalf of all the companies in the research by saying, and it's something Ann had actually talked about a few minutes ago, that really is the highest level of talent that's out in the field that has that distinction. If you're an organization, you know that you have some type of IT implementation that may take 6 to 8 months, and you want the highest level skill set, the highest level of talent to oversee that technology implementation. More times than not, you're going to look to some type of IC or some type of service for overseeing that type of implementation. And strictly speaking, from the procurement point of view, a good way to think of procurement is more or less a group that specializes in spend management. And there's so many different flavors and lights to spend management, and I think if you dig deep within those, you really see the value of getting getting procurement involved in IC management and looking at that as part of the contingent labor umbrella. Procurement and the sourcing group in particular are really well versed in dealing with things like contracts and complexities of contracts. And when you look at an SOW or an agreement between an organization and a business or service, typically there are things like milestones and delivery dates that must be hit upon in order for that contract or that service to be managed in a proper manner. And I think by bringing in procurement to this and not giving it solely to procurement, and I think that's one of the main reasons why all of us on the panel here today, the fact that it's more of a collaborative effort, but leveraging procurement's expertise in spend management and the fact that they're well versed in dealing with vendors and providers and services and things like that, it's really beneficial because they know all of the different components of the agreement. They know that there's an aspect of spend management to it, and you think about, why is procurement even involved at all if you take apart their expertise? The fact is the average organization is spending a great deal of finances on their contract talent, and one of the biggest findings that's come out of my research this year so far is that nearly 26% of the average company's workforce is considered contract, contingent, or temporary in some sense. That's huge. That's 1 out of every 4 workers at the average organization that is considered temporary in some sense. And think about, the fact that just a year ago, I write yearly studies on this topic. Back in 2011, that figure was around 22.5%. So that's about a 12-13% increase year over year for the amount of workers within the average organization that's working on a contract basis. And I see that Jay flipped to this next slide. And here's a very interesting nugget of research from my latest study. And one of the things that I wanted to do with the latest contingent workforce management research study was try to figure out what is the current structure of contingent workforce management right now, and what do companies anticipate that looking like just 2 years down the line. And Jay has mentioned a couple times already the term the contingent labor umbrella, and this is a term that was coined a couple years ago in my 2010 research study that really revolved around the aspect that contingent labor management, contingent workforce management, whatever we actually call it, isn't just about staffing suppliers and vendors anymore. It's this idea that independent contractors and projects and SOW-based services are all part of this greater umbrella. And the fact of the matter is that we find that only 23% of organizations currently are able or are actually managing all aspects of modern contingent labor under the same program. But when you look at what the plan structure is in just a couple of years from now, we see that number jumps to 64%. That's the vast majority of companies that are expected to manage all of the aspects of the modern contingent labor umbrella under a centralized and formalized program. And, making the correlation to the topic on hand today about ICs and IC management, I think it becomes even more important for companies to involve procurement and have them work with HR and legal to really to generate a full understanding and a full level of intelligence into the slice of the contingent labor umbrella.
Chris, you bring up a number of really good points. Obviously, having spent some time studying this, you're clearly aware of where contract talent has moved from the earlier days in the early 2000s after an initial recession, and then back again to an even stronger level as this LA Times reporter is finding that there's even a greater dependency. And it's not so much that it takes a dip after or before a recession and then rises after. It's consistently rising. But there are some increased legal concerns that have come up as well. And what we're seeing is that to make this an enterprise movement and make it work, you need to bring your legal general counsel to the table as well. So let's go to Deb now and see if we get some perspective on what are the risks that companies should be aware of if they're engaging these independent consultants or individual service providers as a 1099. Deb?
Yeah, thanks, Jay. And now for the buzzkill portion of the presentation. So obviously, it's clear from the economy, from sort of where we're going, and Chris mentioned independents are important. They're an important part of the workforce. But there are some pretty significant legal risks involved in engaging them. And so, the reality, we're not really going to go through the specifics of what is an independent contractor, what isn't an independent contractor. Generally, there's lots of different agencies that have their rules around this. The Internal Revenue Service, the Department of Labor, the EEOC. There's various regulatory tests. Generally, the IRS will go through behavioral control, financial control, and the relationships of the parties. The bottom line is, why do we care? Why do we care around classification of whether someone's an independent contractor or an employee? And the bottom line is there's liability for unpaid overtime pay if there's a misclassification. In addition, there's potential violations of state law requirements regarding the timing of wage payments to employees, in addition to record-keeping obligations, which would include penalties from time to time. The big thing, liability for failure to withhold federal, state, and local taxes and FICA. And really what I'm seeing is, now with the economy the way it is, states want their piece of the pie. The federal government wants their piece of the pie. And so we've heard, federal enforcement that the IRS has announced plans to collect $7 billion in payroll taxes. There's new state statutes, California, Connecticut, that are really cracking down on enforcement of independent contractor misclassification. Another piece is unemployment compensation premiums and benefits. Workers' liability premiums and benefits to the extent that someone is classified as an independent contractor and, in fact, they perhaps should have been considered an employee. What if they fall down, get hurt, or hurt someone else? There's potential workers' compensation issues. Another piece is claims that a misclassified contractor should have been eligible to participate in a company's employee benefit plans. That was really, for those of you that have been in the industry for a while, the whole Microsoft issue around classification of Microsoft folks as independent contractors or temporary employees rather than regular employees. And they said, wait a minute, I should be eligible to participate in benefits, including, importantly, the stock plans. Another piece is misclassified contractors may have standing to assert statutory discrimination claims. So Title VII, EEOC, all of that fun, co-employment issues. And then finally, may not be a tremendously large issue, but the right to organize and form unions. So We've seen some class actions. In April of 2011, AT&T settles a class action for $12.5 million. November 2011, Oracle settles a class action for $35 million. So the risk is real and it's out there. So what are some of the triggers that can commonly prompt either a claim or an audit? If there's an individual in the organization that is receiving both a W-2 and a 1099 in the same year, the IRS will say, hey, there's a bit of a red flag there. Independent contractor files for unemployment, so you have an arrangement where you identify someone as an independent contractor, they finish their work for you, and then they go ahead and file unemployment, and you're like, well, wait a minute, they're an independent contractor. Well, they may not think so anymore. And it really doesn't matter what kind of paper or agreement they sign at the time. It's really facts and circumstances, which is why it's so important to have a robust process around this, which is sort of, again, as Chris mentioned, is sort of the whole reason behind this presentation today. Another piece is if the independent contractor doesn't particularly like the way they're classified and they go to the Department of Labor or they go to the IRS or they go to, in my case, sort of our arch enemies, the plaintiff class action lawyers. Because, it's from an individual perspective and also a federal and state agency perspective.
Yeah, good point. Deb, you've been doing this for a number of organizations and in your legal counsel. Have you seen any one particular trigger or anything that might be outside of this list that is also particularly alarming or showing up lately?
There's always been, so for example, areas of the workforce, so IT, that's always been kind of a tricky situation because you have, to Ann's point, there's experts in the world, and we want those experts to provide the services that we need, and they may not want to be employees. IT back in the mid-'90s to the late '90s, IT was the sort of the hot topic, and it changes from time to time who those folks are, but it really is it moves from hot spot to hot spot.
I think there's something to be said for definitions, and I know that I've spent a lot of time trying to research what is the defined independent contractor, and there's a 3-question test or an ABC test at the state level. There used to be a 20-point questionnaire. Now I'm starting to get it actually more simplified, and one of the things that I use in our organization has been successful sharing with clients is the whole idea that if an independent professional sees themselves as self-employable, that's the beginning of moving them towards an IC classification. But when I say it's the beginning, it's also the end if they don't see themselves as self-employable, if they don't see themselves as independent business people willing to accept the responsibilities, risks, and rewards of independent work. So it's one of those things where you could stop the whole process from moving forward just by clearly identifying that these individuals are not self-employable. So how do you identify that? We've come up with about 8 points that are pretty simple to quickly ID a self-employable individual. Number one, somebody who considers independent work and has a desire to own their own business. Somebody who's marketing their services to the outside community. You're not their only client. Somebody who's experiencing the idea of managing a revenue stream and expenses, and they aren't looking for a paycheck. If they ask for an hourly pay, then you know that's not really business scenario. But if they're asking to charge you a charge rate for their time or a specific amount for a deliverable, that sounds more like a business arrangement. If they're paid when the invoice is paid as opposed to standard weekly payroll terms. If they find their own work. They see this as something that they're not doing necessarily as a result of somebody who's dictating what work they do. They're finding their own work. And then somebody that works under a contract or a statement of work that clearly defines the beginning, the end of the project, what milestones and deliverables have to be accomplished, and you're not controlling the output and how they do that work. They also understand the tax implications of independent work. Somebody who doesn't pay their taxes isn't necessarily an independent contractor, although the government might think that. The idea is that an independent worker has a different way of filing their taxes, and they must understand taxes have to be paid. And I also understand that they have to carry business insurance, that under the employment terms, you're covered by mandated insurance, workers' comp, for example. But if you're an independent contractor, you don't have those coverage, so you have to buy business liability or E&O insurance or some other blanket liability coverage that protects both you and your client and, of course, their workers as well. Because, again, if you get hurt on the job, you don't have that limit that workers' comp provides. You could be a massive claim and go down the chute along with the company who's got that claim against them. So those are some quick tips, and let's kind of take it to the next best practice area where I think we've got some expert advice, and our panelists have been through the ringer on this in a few different ways. So, Ann, let's start with talent acquisition and HR. What have you guys discovered at WellPoint or at your other employment that you might have considered a best practice in engaging these independent contractors?
Well, I would start with the first dot point on your slide. It talks about creating cross-functional teams. Depending on your organization, depending on your culture, depending on your structure, you probably have multiple groups of people who are in some way, shape, or form involved with independence. Procurement, for instance, might be doing the payment, and somebody might be involved from legal or writing contract or contingent workforce management. Regardless, I think what you need to do is figure out who's involved and then get them all involved, because there is probably in your organization a culture of independence, and those individuals are being touched by a lot of people. So make sure that you're getting everybody on board. You need to assess the risk. You've got to find out where your independent contractor populations are. They are probably someplace that you might not be aware of. If you're in a large company, I think you might be surprised if you tried to do an independent contractor audit, particularly if you're fairly decentralized in either structure or physical structure. Those folks might be out there and you might not be aware. But that gives you an idea of what you're looking at and what you're managing. I'm a big believer in creating formal processes. I am a human resources person, and as such, we tend to be always looking for the risk assessment of situations around bringing in resources. But I do think that a formal process is very important, and that way everybody knows that. There's a lot of informal processes in an organization. If you put one out there, make it clear, people can try to work within the guidelines. Executive sponsorship, in my experience, is most important, because this isn't exactly a grassroots kinds of things. Probably if you have independent contractors in your organizations, they're probably effective, and your business people are going to feel very strongly about them. You're not going to hear a lot of people looking to change the status quo. So you have to make sure that I believe that executive sponsors are in place and are supportive of you, because you probably will receive some pushback from your organization. We are, in the end, regardless of our field, responsible for the business itself. And improving the visibility of what one organization is spending on independent contractors is extremely important, and probably surprising once you do that if you're not doing it today. It is probably not insignificant if you have a large organization, and spending in particularly in this day and age, and for some specific industries, and maybe all of us, is a very important issue. And you need to know that your business is getting the benefits from the money that you're putting out. And if independents are hidden, if you're not looking at what the spend is, if it's coming out of different accounts and being paid by different means, then a business leader is not able to figure out what his or her financial situation is and whether they're getting the return for their money. If you have large or even small and important incumbent populations, people who are already in there as independents, it is likely that those individuals are now part of your work processes. And if you disrupt that particular set of resources, you can disrupt a work process, and you could cause an infrastructure collapse if in fact a business is so reliant on those people. So if you have large incumbent populations of independent contractors, I strongly recommend that you look at a long-term strategy and you work with your business. One of those groups beyond procurement, beyond human resources, beyond contingent management, that's very important to this is your business partners. And so while we can create a framework, if you've got a large incumbent population, you have to involve that business partner because, you don't want to pull the rug out from under them. You want to make sure that they can work with what you're doing and get you to where you need to go. And that will take a lot of patience and a lot of persistence. It might take longer than you anticipate. It may not, depending on what your business partners are doing and how they feel this will impact their population. But I think you just need to be patient and need to, be consistent and persistent with that. The one thing that I really strongly recommend, and this is just my personal opinion about this, is that if you make things easier, folks will use them. It seems simple, but look at the aspects of the engagement of an independent contractor and figure out what works well for your management and why they love them. Because if you're dealing with shaking up an independent contractor group that is part of your structure, you need to figure out what is most important to both the independents and the management, and allow them to retain as much as they can. Really the goal of providing some structure around this is to make sure you reduce the risk, identify the costs, and manage that population. It's not to try to, take everything out of what makes that a successful relationship. And so I think for every business it'll be different, but I think that's an important thing to pay attention to.
And this is a great list. This slide is something every HR professional listening to this presentation should take pretty seriously, because this does hit all the salient points, and firsthand that these are all important. Let me ask just a couple of quick questions. Maybe you could elaborate a little bit. You say you want to institute a formal process, but you also want to make it easy. Is there a little conflict in that statement that you're adding maybe a process and an overview, a governance, yet is it really ever going to make it easier?
Yeah, it probably not always in the minds and experience of the manager, but one of the things that I would recommend is if you've got a functioning system in another place, say your contingent workforce, is to not add another, and this is I fondly remember this because somebody accused me of it, add another boutique system from human resources, another process, another practice, another set of passwords that somebody has to remember. If you can integrate it in something that is already used and present by your management, then you will make it easier for them. Just try to shave off the edges of what will feel probably annoying to them and make it so that the process is more straightforward. Provide concierge service if you have to get them to that point. And that's easy to say, but in today's world, you probably don't have enough resources to do anything that you're doing today, much less add concierge resources. But I think it might be well worth your time in the short to spend lots of concentrated time and effort in making them comfortable for the long of getting your hands around the risk that independence can cause.
Yeah, it's a bit of why our company's in business today, because nobody has the expertise and the resource bandwidth to add that level of concierge service, at least through the orientation and the change management that it takes to institute one of these programs. Very, very good points, Ann.
Thank you.
So let's go into another perspective and look at the best practices. From a legal perspective, we know that there's a lot of risk. We understand that engagement isn't really optional. We need to use these resources. What should the legal minds be concerned about, and what precautions have been taken, Deb?
Well, that's a good question, Jay, and I just want to reiterate everything that Ann said was just a fantastic list, and it really underscores the fact that we all have skin in the game, the business, HR, procurement, legal, because at the end of the day, if things go south, everybody's on the hook. And so it's, a legal risk, but it's also a cost containment, sort of a way to mitigate and manage a system for cost and legal compliance. So to sort of expand on what Ann said, as far as how do you get your hands around this from a legal perspective, and also from an HR procurement perspective, is one way I've seen in my experience is go for the jugular, go for where it starts, which is accounts payable. If you can identify where the risk is, and that risk starts, but that risk is enunciated by where they get paid, then that's one way to start the analysis on what is going on out there. To the extent that you know what's going on, so step one would be do an audit potentially of where is your risk, where is your potential issues, and be prepared for an audit from an external party, from the IRS, from a plaintiff's firm, from the DOL. And I would say, I know on the slide it says be prepared for an audit if you are out of compliance. I would sort of add, even if you're not out of compliance, we want to make sure that the process is sort of, you can kick the tires and it works. Yeah. As far as, happy contractors do make all the difference, to the extent that they're one of the vehicles in identifying to the government, to plaintiff's attorneys, where the risks are, but I think it really comes from inside. I think really from the best practices perspective, it's have a process, know your process, and to the extent you've got, as Ann mentioned, already people involved, maybe phase it out, as she inferred, as far as, phase one being let's start on the new folks that come in. Phase two is let's think about how we, if we need to, convert the folks that are already there and make sure the analysis is done properly. The other important piece is, as I mentioned before, it doesn't matter what the paper says. So you could have a process where, hey, all of these independents have contractors, so have contracting agreements. Everybody's on an independent contractor agreement, so we're good. Well, that's only part of it. It's really around what are they actually doing, and does the contract really stand, for the facts and circumstances behind it.
Mm.
Hey,
Yeah.
Deborah, here's a question actually from Jill in the audience that I'd like to direct to you first, and then maybe we can get everybody to weigh in on. So thanks, Jill. Jill would like to know if you have a specific recommendation on who should, quote, own the IC process. Is there a bigger risk if this is owned by HR and not another department, like even security, perhaps, is Jill's suggestion?
Mm-hmm. And I think we're going to get to this generally, but in my personal opinion, it really depends on the organization. And I really do think, to my core, believe that everybody owns it. That doesn't really help. It's kind of Pollyanna-ish, but it's really, you know what? If my colleagues in HR have an issue, then I have an issue. If my colleagues in procurement have an issue, then I have an issue, because I'm sort of twofold. One is I clean up the messes, but more importantly, I want to make sure the messes don't happen. So for me, that's prevention.
Do you worry at all about, because I've seen this happen at some, and I think it's, totally, like you said, it's totally unique to the culture of the organization, but do you worry at all about the attitude of, like, if everybody owns it, nobody owns it?
I do. I do a little bit, and that's where sort of the herding of the cats comes in, and that's, I think, the first bullet, leadership is critical. So as Ann mentioned, similar in organizations that I've been in, we've had a cross-functional team, and it includes leadership from procurement, leadership from legal, leadership from HR, and it was, with a project manager, with a whip that said, all right, how are we going to lock and load on this? How are we going to get it done? And then making sure that we follow through. In addition, as Ann said, it's getting executive leadership buy-in. So if everybody on the ground knows that this is coming from the top, then there is a lot more sort of buy-in from everyone.
Yeah, Jill's question is so relevant. I'm going to add this comment to it. Your organization will ultimately know where it should reside, but in terms of getting it started, it does appear to be an effort for a procurement to take kind of the lead on this. And I'm going to turn this over to Chris, just because I know he's done a little bit of homework on this particular subject, but the idea is that procurement might be the right team to assemble the resources, the technology, if it's going to be outsourced, who's it outsourced to, if it's going to be a new process, what's that process, how does it integrate with our existing programs, and so on. In the long run, though, where does it reside? That does, to me, really depend on the organization. So procurement best practices, what do you think, Chris?
Thanks, Jay. Actually, I'll agree with one of the first items that you said there, that, procurement has a lot of value in handling relationships, worrying about agreements and figuring out whether there's a need to outsource to a technology or consultative provider. But as far as some best practices go, first bullet here, companies really need to figure out whether their IC population is large enough or has enough impact on the organization that it should be in line with contingent workforce. For smaller organizations, this may not be a large issue. You may only be utilizing a handful of ICs or IC-type services across the organization. It's when you're looking at, a figure like 50% of your entire contingent workforce is on that IC side, that project and SOW-based services side. That's when you really need to align it with a contingent workforce program and borrow some of the some of the best practices and the best-in-class attributes from that program over to IC management. Also, too, make sure that, all your ICs within the organization are tied to a very well-defined and complex SOW and have a contract that includes language around subcontracting and insurance. And, again, here's another really interesting benefit of procurement. I mean, they're very, very well-versed in handling agreements and contractors with, providers and suppliers on the direct material side. When you apply some of that thought process to the indirect or complex spend side, there's definitely a benefit. One of the things that I mentioned about 10 or 15 minutes ago was the fact that a gigantic portion of managing SOW-based labor is having a good view or real-time view into how the work stands against some of the negotiated agreements and milestones and delivery dates and things like that. Procurement really has a lot of expertise there, so it's really important for companies to leverage that. And finally, know what to do when ICs are not self-employed. So one of the major themes, I think, of today's webinar excuse me, is the fact that ICs really are a very special skill set. They're the highest level talent. I know we've all said that a few times. You don't want to lose those types of workers, especially if they have a very large impact on specific and very crucial projects within your organization. So know where HR and legal stands. Know that if you're in procurement or if you're standing outside of procurement, you know that you feel comfortable having those groups collaborate on this type of program. Know what to do so you don't lose that talent. Jay, if you want to flip to the next slide. I'd like to basically conclude with some interesting figures and findings from my latest research. When Jay invited me to participate on this panel, one of the quick things that I did was take a look at my data and filtered it by companies that have a procurement-led contingent workforce management program. And you see there's a lot of visibility benefits here to having procurement take a big chunk of that responsibility. And, we find that procurement-led contingent workforce management programs are 64% more likely to have high visibility into how ICs are utilized across the entire organization. And again, it all really comes back to the spend management and expertise that procurement holds. If you apply that expertise to the IC management realm, you're going to know where ICs are working, which divisions they're working in, knowing which programs they're tied to, which projects they're tied to, and the status of those projects as well. I've also found that having procurement involved in the contingent workforce management program leads to a 58% higher frequency of having high visibility into IC compliance. I know at the very beginning of today's webinar, Jay outlined some of the compliance aspects, the co-employment aspects, the federal audit aspects of leveraging ICs. Because procurement is getting more involved in managing contract talent, they're becoming much more well-versed in this area than they were 5 years ago or 10 years ago. So these procurement groups understand the implications of using ICs, and they're helping to take the proper steps to ensure that they're meeting compliance requirements. And another interesting fact that's a little bit varied from the top two bullets is the fact that procurement-led programs are 30% more likely to outsource management of contingent labor umbrella aspects to outside third-party solutions, whether it's a technology solution like a VMS or it's a more consultative program and solution like an ICES or an MSP. The bulk of my research really focuses on the fact that there is a lot of value to outsourcing, and companies that are using some of these outside solutions are able to gain visibility benefits, cost benefits, compliance benefits. One of the interesting items that came out of my most recent research study was the fact that users of those three solutions that were outlined in the previous slide are more likely to have a higher rate of their contingent workers meet, achieve, or even exceed some of the predefined and communicated goals. So there's a quality and effectiveness aspect there as well to outsourcing. Very quickly here, because I know that we're looking to wrap up in the next 5 minutes or so. Again, I took a look at how procurement was managing some of the IC management capabilities as opposed to all other functions, and we can see, I promise I won't go line item by line item, but some of the compliance aspects are more likely to be in place in a procurement-led program. You look at something like the next to last line item in the chart, centralized tracking system to view utilization of ICs enterprise-wide, really shows the fact that procurement-led programs are more likely to leverage some of their visibility aspects to gain intelligence into how ICs are used across the entire organization. And we'll look in the middle really quick here before I hand it back over to Jay, but collaborative management and sharing of IC usage information, really one of the underlying themes of today's webinar. Procurement-led programs, they're the ones that share some of that information so our friends in HR and legal are aware of what's going on within IC engagement management, making sure that we're driving quality and effectiveness, and, of course, making sure that we're meeting requirements as well.
Well, thanks, Chris. I'll tell you, we're not going to have a lot of time for wrap-up, but it's been very engaging. Guys have been great, good points, and I hope you're all taking notes, and we will have this copy available as well as rebroadcast for future reference. So let's just sort of summarize what is the role that HR needs to play. I think what we've seen is HR needs to enforce the policies to minimize misclassification mistakes, put that team together and make sure there's a process. Look at employees returning as consultants. Is that the proper way, and are they handled properly? What about part-time workers brought back and handled as a 1099? That may not be the best way to work through these variable requirements that you have. And also look at your freelance employees. A lot of people think freelancers are kind of outside of the compliance window. Not true. Needs a special scrutiny. The other thing is HR needs to look at the expansion of their workforce programs and may need to include SOW project workers or engaging those self-employable consultants. And also ICs should be part of that strategic workforce plan, as we talked about. So HR needs to step in, make sure that that's part of the consideration. And if there's work that's not going to be handled by a full-time regular employee, not a staff aug requirement, that it's accounted for and may be sourced for through procurement. So, again, we won't have a lot of time for questions, but I'm available for follow-up at the email address and the phone number. So are our panelists, and I'd be very happy to broker any conversations that need to occur from this point forward.
Thank you so much, Jay. I think that probably the biggest takeaway that I've had is you could probably imagine, because we are an HR and talent management audience here at HCI, there is considerable debate as to the recommendation that procurement own the process, with many of our members speaking up and sharing their comments that they feel like it should be owned by HR, and certainly research that HCI has done has supported that as well, although we measure for different things. And it's interesting to look at your research, Chris, because you're measuring certainly for different things than HR measures. So we're looking at things like manager satisfaction and employee engagement. But I think that probably is going to be a debate for another time, Jay. So I think it would be a great debate. Maybe we'll want to do that on a future webcast. We are
Absolutely.
We are at the end of our time together. So I just want to say thank you again to our panelists. Jay was absolutely right, a very engaged and fascinating conversation today. Thank you, Deborah Burns, Ann Odenall, Chris Dwyer, and Jay Lash for your time today. It's been really valuable.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Finally, I'd like to say do stay tuned. We have another webcast starting at the top of the hour and another webcast in this series that I do hope you'll make sure to join us for as more details emerge in the coming weeks.
I think we have our topic, too.
Yeah, I think we have our topic, Jay. Will take place on September 9th or thereabouts. We might have to tweak it slightly, but I think that's the date for now. So stay tuned. We'll have more details for you on that soon. Thanks, folks. Enjoy this upcoming webcast. We'll look forward to seeing you on another one soon. Have a great day.